Welcome, welcome, welcome. Jenny, this is number 6, believe it or not.
Number 6.
Yeah, that you're doing this.
Yes,
Yeah.
6th in a
Hi,
row.
everybody.
Very excited to have everybody with us. And it's just one of those things that is just continuing to evolve very much in line with a lot of the stuff from the Tao, as it just is taking on a life of its own. And we know we're not in control, but continue to let it slide. But we always like to start with gratitude. So Jenny, what are you grateful for today?
Oh gosh, I'm grateful for my practice, but I'm grateful to have this wonderful guest, Solala, with us today. My new friend and my Taoist chi pal. I'm so excited to just be in this chi field with you. I'm really excited about this. So, and everybody that's joining. I am just grateful for everybody, all the zillions of people in the world. We're here together,
Mhm.
which I
Very
love.
good.
How about how about you?
I'm always grateful for you, Jenny, and just for your spirit and example and just who you are. And it's just wonderful to be able to do this work together. And really excited and grateful for our special guest that we've got. So, why don't we get started? Because I know we're going to have a whole lot of questions. So, I'll do a quick little welcome and introduction. And then we'll get started. Welcome, everybody, to the Wild Tea Party. This is a space where tea and movement converge to bring harmony, connection, and vitality to our lives. Together, we embark on a journey inspired by the timeless wisdom of tea and the flowing energy of Qigong. Thich Nhat Hanh offers us this guiding reflection. Drink your tea slowly and reverently, as if it is the axis on which the whole world earth revolves.
Mhm.
Slowly, evenly, without rushing towards the future. Live the actual moment. Only this moment is life. In this spirit, each session will not only explore the mystery, mythology, and health benefits of a specific tea or herb, but also weave in the gentle practice of Qigong. Just as tea invites us to pause and savor life, Qigong helps us to cultivate presence and energy through mindful movement. Together, they create a synergy that nourishes both body and spirit, offering balance, clarity, and transformation. We're honored to have you join us tonight on our shared journey as we celebrate the simple yet profound acts that ground us in the present moment. We invite you to bring your curiosity, your open heart, and perhaps in the future, a friend or two to share in this unique blend of tea and qigong. Together, we will steep ourselves in the wisdom of nature and the flow of life. With all of that in mind, we welcome you to this very special edition of the Wild Tea Party. Tonight, we are honored to have with us a true master of Taoist wisdom, a lifelong explorer of the Tao, and a man whose voice, both in words and in music, has guided countless seekers on their journey. Solala Towler has spent over 30 years immersed in the practice of Taoist philosophy, Qigong, and the ancient art of tea. As a longtime editor of The Empty Vessel, the Journal of Taoist Philosophy and Practice, the author of 14 books, including one of my very favorite tea stories, The Tea House at the Edge of the World. He's also a past president of the National Qigong Association, and he has been instrumental in bringing these deep teachings to the West. He has traveled to China's sacred mountains, recorded beautiful meditative music, and continues to inspire with his workshops and retreats. So please join me. We can't really give him a warm welcome in the audible sense, but maybe a deep, heartfelt bow and welcome Solala, a man who truly embodies the free and easy wandering spirit of the Tao. Thank you so much for being with us.
Great. It's great to be here. Should I be pinning myself or something?
I
Oh,
can pin you. I
yeah.
gotcha.
Okay. Let me go.
Spotlight.
There we go. Wow, this is so great. I met Todd at the National Qigong Association conference in Savannah, Georgia in September.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I just met Jenny yesterday, and here I am online in what I call Cyber DAO. This beautiful area that we get to connect in. Even though we can't be together all the time in person, we get to be together here. And something Todd mentioned, there's a Japanese phrase called Ichigo Ichi, which refers to what Thich Nhat Hanh was saying about this moment. This present moment is the only moment we have right now. So let's really enter it as deeply and with as much gratitude as we possibly can, because with gratitude comes grace. Todd mentioned a story. I usually start my classes with a story. I think people really appreciate learning things from stories rather than just me explaining Taoist principles. So I have this book. It's called The Tea House at the Edge of the World. And it's an interesting collection of stories. I'll say the brief explanation is no one knows how long the tea house at the edge of the world has been there or where it came from. Some people say it came from, quote, nowhere, and some people say it has always been there, like the sun. This seems like the likeliest story. What is known is that it is impossible to go directly to the tea house at the edge of the world. One must just find him or herself there. It is not listed on any maps and certainly not in any guidebooks. Some people say it exists in some kind of subliminal zone just outside the periphery of consciousness. I have also been told that it is only by a spiritual journey that one can arrive there. I'm going to change this light thing. It's not working too good. There, that's better. So I wrote this book a few years ago, and the way I wrote all the stories was I would just have a line, an image that would come to me. The first one I wrote, and the line was the seeker who was sick of seeking. And then I would have to come up with a story. Or other one, if we have time, I'll share the boy with stones for eyes. And then I would just start writing, what in the world could that mean? And then I'm halfway through, I'm going, how is this going to end? And it all just came together. It's really fun. So this one is called The Seeker. Technology. Here we go. The seeker had been seeking for so long he was sick of seeking. He often wanted to just give up and go back to his humdrum life, where, if he was not happy, he at least was not driven by the need to seek. He was seeking the usual things, peace of mind, enlightenment, etc. He had sat at the feet of many illustrious spiritual teachers, had spent a fortune on various workshops and private sessions with those teachers, some of whom were authentic teachers, while others were charlatans or worse. He had danced for hours chanting the holy names of the various gods and goddesses, spent countless hours in deep meditation, had conjured up complicated and colorful mandalas in his mind, had twisted his body into ever more difficult yoga positions, had done breathing exercises until he was dizzy, had spent one long night puking into a plastic bucket after eating ayahuasca, but none of it helped. None of it helped because deep down inside himself, he did not truly believe in any of the practices he practiced. And the reason for that was because deep down, way down deep under everything else, he did not truly believe that he deserved to be happy, healthy, and possibly enlightened. Of course, several of his counselors, psychiatrists, and even good friends had pointed this out, but he had always dismissed the idea, thinking of course he deserved all the good things of life. After all, he was a good person. He did not seek unfair advantage over anyone else. He did not steal or lie or abuse anyone. He was not a racist, he was pretty sure. He was not a sexist, so he believed. And he was not a stupid person, so he hoped. All in all, he was a pretty decent guy, and of course he deserved to be happy, healthy, and possibly enlightened. Maybe it was bad karma, he told his counselors and friends, and even his girlfriend. He had been such a despicable person in his last lifetime that now he was paying for it. His Tibetan Buddhist friend had agreed with him, though not as passionately as he would have hoped. His girlfriend had agreed with him, though not as enthusiastically as he would have liked. Maybe he was not paying for evil deeds in his last lifetime, she had pointed out. Maybe he was paying for the thoughts and feelings he was having right now, in this lifetime, in this moment. Of course, they'd end up having a big argument about it and had agreed to disagree, although they had broken up soon after, though most likely she had broken up with him. It finally got to the point when he had given up on the whole idea of becoming enlightened and decided to just live a humdrum life of being nothing special, though he still harbored thoughts of enlightenment now and then. But then his Zen Buddhist friend had told him that the search for enlightenment was exactly what got in the way of true enlightenment, so he had even given that up. The more he thought about it, the more he was sure that just living a life without too much suffering was the best that he could do. He stopped all his spiritual practices, fired his counselor, and stopped hanging out with any of his Buddhist friends. He decided that what he needed was a vacation from his own mind, if that were possible. So he signed up for a trek in the mountains of Nepal. True, it was a long ways away from San Francisco where he lived and was a much more challenging bit of hiking than what he was used to, and even a bit more Buddhist than what he would have liked. But he had heard that the Nepalese people were some of the friendliest people on the planet and that the views were magnificent, and so signed up with a travel agency one of his old Buddhist friends had once told him about. It was a long journey, and he felt more than a little jet lagged and a bit life lagged at the beginning, but all the Nepalese folks at the guest house were so friendly and so warm and so nice that he quickly began to feel much more at ease. Actually, he ended up feeling much more at ease here in the Nepali guest house than he usually did at his own home in that shining city by the sea. It's true that the food did not agree with him, and he spent a fair amount of time in the bathroom, but it was all worth it. Eventually, he found that if he just stuck to the rice and not the lentils, he did much better. Finally came the day for the first hike. They had given him a few days to acclimate to the altitude. At first, he was huffing and puffing just walking from one level of the guest house to the next, but after a few days, he felt ready to do some hiking. The air felt so fresh, the light itself seemed different than at home, and at night the stars seemed so close he could have put out his hand and touched them. Unfortunately, the hiking did not go so well. He had to stop so many times to catch his breath and for his legs to stop shaking that he soon fell behind the group. The guide was having an animated conversation with a pretty girl from Sweden and did not notice, and he was left alone and bereft on the trail, which for him had become a trail of tears. His legs were shaking, he was breathing in large gasps, and the fact that he was now alone on a mountain in Nepal did not seem nearly as romantic as what he had envisioned when he read the colorful brochure. He looked wildly all around but could see no one. He thought he'd better retrace his steps back to the guest house, but somehow he had lost all sense of direction. At one point, he just sat on the ground, slumped in sadness, and cried for about 20 minutes. Finally, after wiping away his somewhat frozen tears, he got up and picked one direction where the trail had seemed to at least be going downhill and began to clomp his way down to what he was hoped was a friendly and warm guest house. But alas, the guest house did not appear, and he seemed to be getting more and more lost and more helpless and hapless until all at once he saw the outline of a building a little higher up and a bit off the trail, so he made for it. Hopefully, he thought to himself, there will be some friendly Nepalese people there. The closer he got to the little building, the more ramshackle it appeared. So ramshackle that it looked as though one good wind or a large breeze would topple the whole thing over, whereupon it would undoubtedly roll all the way down the mountain. Nevertheless, he pressed on, and at last found himself at the door, which he banged on quite enthusiastically, though no one answered his frantic pounding. After a while of fruitless knocking, he tried the door and found it unlocked. With a bit of trepidation, he opened it and looked into the gloomy, half-dark room. There did not seem to be anything in it but one small, very low table with two cushions, one on either side of the table. He entered the room and looked around. There did not seem to be anyone there. He was so exhausted by this time he found himself sinking down onto one of the cushions. Presently, a very old woman appeared. Her back was so bent with age or disease that her head was at a perpendicular level to the floor, and she had to turn her head off to one side to look up at him. "Hello there," she said in Nepali, but for some reason he could understand her as if she were speaking English. "You're just in time for tea." So saying, she hobbled over to the other side of the room and lifted a large metal kettle which had been quietly bubbling over a small charcoal fire. It was quite a large kettle, and he looked very heavy, yet he lifted it with ease and practically skipped over to the table, where he sat, feeling like he was in a dream. "This is a dream," he thought to himself. "I have collapsed on the trail and am dreaming. Soon I will wake up, unless I actually freeze to death on the mountain," which seemed a very likely possibility. But no, he was not dreaming. As a matter of fact, or fancy, he was at the tea house at the edge of the world, which of course he had never heard of. He sat and watched the old woman put the kettle down on the table, which almost toppled over, it was so heavy. She laughed a small and ancient laugh and adjusted the kettle so the table righted itself again. Then she reached behind herself and produced a small clay teapot, a small clay bowl, and two tiny teacups. The bowl held some dry and shriveled leaves, and the old woman picked a small handful and placed them into the small clay teapot. Then, giggling like a schoolgirl, she poured hot water from the immense kettle into the pot, and just after a moment or so, poured the golden liquid into two tiny cups. She slid one over to her mystified guest and nodded at him expectantly. "Good heavens," he thought to himself, "she wants me to drink this stuff, even though I have no idea what it is. What if she's trying to poison me?" But she looked over at him with such a warm and toothless smile that he felt a bit reassured and dared to bring the tiny cup to his lips. It was very hot, and he almost dropped it, but managed to get a small sip and immediately felt better. He dared another sip and then another. The brew felt like warm gold running down his throat and into his belly. He felt himself smiling back at the old woman and even holding his cup out for more. She filled his cup and once again he drank and felt the hot liquid move through his whole body. It felt like a warm hand was gently massaging his organs from the inside of his body. "What is this stuff?" he wondered. "And am I dying?" But it felt so good, he decided that if he were dying, he didn't care. For what seemed a long time, he sat there, smiling back at the old woman, whose face seemed to shift from an old woman to a very young woman, back to an old woman, back to a young one again. He sat watching this like it was a movie unfurling before him. It didn't seem to frighten him, though later he wondered why. He felt his lids growing heavy, and he did not notice when he fell completely backwards onto the floor. He did not know how long he was out, but when he came to, the old woman was gone, and he was alone in the rickety building, which seemed to be swaying slightly in the breeze. He stumbled out the door and by some kind of miracle found the right trail back to the guest house, though he had no idea how, and found his own room and collapsed onto his bed with its thin mattress and warm blanket and slept some more. In the middle of the night, he got up to pee and stepped outside for a moment, gazing up at the close stars and wondered what had just happened to him and why did he feel so good and peaceful. It felt as though all the worrying and searching he had been doing in the last few years as a dedicated seeker seemed as though they had happened to someone else, not him. Not to the guy who was standing out under the glistening stars somewhere in the mountains at the edge of the world, here in far off Nepal, except that it was not actually far off, but right here and right now. Of course, when he told his guide, who had been worried about him and sure he was about to be fired, about the rickety building and the old woman and the magical tea, he had just laughed at him and said it was probably the altitude playing tricks on his mind. But he knew better. He felt better. And he decided not to argue with the guide and instead keep the whole experience to himself as if it were a precious treasure, which it was. Though he often thought to himself, what the hell was in that tea anyway? But in the end, as in the beginning, it didn't really matter what was in the tea. Magic, he thought, deep down in his being, magic tea. He was a bit worried that once he got home and back to his normal routine, that the glow of his experience at the tea house at the edge of the world would fade, but it did not. Instead, it seemed to grow, and he felt more at peace with himself than he ever had in his life. He tried to tell a few of his friends about it, but they looked at him as if it was a dream he was describing, not something that had actually happened to him. Even his Buddhist friends were a bit skeptical, but when he told his ex-girlfriend about it, she began to look at him in a new light. He felt different, she said, more solid, less obscure, clearer, and more grounded, and even, dare she say it, happy. And the truth was, he was happy and more solid, etc. He often lay back on his bed in the middle of the night, looking up at the ceiling and seeming to see the clear and bright Nepalese stars winking and glistening at him. And if he reached out his hand, even a little, he was able to gather them up and pour them into his heart, where they bubbled gently away like a tea kettle made of light. The end.
Wow, that was beautiful. That's not only a good story, but you have such a good voice to tell the story as well. So it was very good. Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Very beautiful. Just have a couple of questions, and then I'd love for you to just continue to lead us. Were you always a writer?
Yes, when I was in high school, I wanted to grow up and be a writer. And I grew up in a working class household, and I was the first. My father never graduated high school. I was the first person to go to college in my whole family in 1968. But I quickly realized I wasn't going to learn how to be a writer by going to college. It was in Boston. And in 1968, there was so much amazing stuff going on in the streets and the parks and in Boston and New York, San Francisco, everywhere. So I dropped out after one semester and started living my life in a really wonderful way and had many magical experiences in the 60s. Those of us who grew up there then know it was a magical time. And I just was a huge reader, always read. Even in high school, I was reading Dostoevsky and all this kind of stuff. And I think that's the way to learn how to be a writer is to read a lot. So I've been writing ever since, and I have a bunch of books out, and I'm waiting to hear from a publisher. I'm very excited about another book of guided meditations that I wrote. And I did publish, you mentioned the Empty Vessel. I published that for 25 years, the only Taoist magazine in the West, and then passed it on about 5 years ago. Yeah, so that's my thing. And I mentioned to these guys yesterday that I did get sick. I was sick for 10 years with chronic fatigue syndrome, which in the West, they don't understand at all, and they have no treatment, no cure. And until I was totally bedridden, and Chinese herbs got me out of bed, and Qigong is what cured me like 35 years ago. So I'm a big believer in Chinese medicine and Qigong. And I've been studying Qigong for a long time, and I love it. Saved my life. And then tea came into my life. And I have a tea room in my house that my partner Shanti and I share tea every day. And we get to check in with each other and we invite people over for tea. And I have a big piece of calligraphy that a Chinese friend of mine did for me. In fact, I have it in the other book of mine, Tea Mind, Tea Heart, which I'll share a little bit from. But the calligraphy is, oh, I thought I had it all. Ah, here it is. It's horizontal, but this is the calligraphy. And what it means, it's Pin Ming Lun Dao, which means savor tea, discuss Dao. Now, this character, Pin, is three mouths. Those of you who speak Chinese probably know if you ask someone, do they want to drink tea? You say, cha, drink tea. But this is savor tea. And Pin is an ancient word for tea. Before the word cha, actually, they used to call it Pin. Whoops. And then Lundao is discuss Tao or just share from your heart, share stories, poems, what's been going on in your life. So it just immediately puts you into this mind state and heart state of we're here in this special Ichigo Ichi moment. this endless, timeless time and the timeless time to share with each other something straight from our heart. That's what tea means to me.
Wonderful. I think it's Jenny and I were talking about this earlier. It would have been impossible for us to find a more appropriate first guest for the Wild Tea Party with everything that you are. You're like the embodiment of everything that we're trying to do and the work that we want to do. So thank you again so much for being here. I have one last question and then turn it
Sure.
over to you to lead us. So obviously you've spent many years steeped in the Tao and the culture and tea and all of that. Why do you think the Tao Te Ching in particular
Mm.
isn't more well known in the West?
That's a very good question. And we were discussing this a little earlier that in my experience after doing the magazine and teaching Taoism for many years, that the people who seem to be the most attracted to Taoism are highly individuated non-joiner types. When I had the magazine, people would write and say, "Where can I go to a Taoist retreat center and work in the garden and learn Qigong?" And I have to say there really aren't any places like that in the West. There's lots of Buddhist places you can go and do that because the Buddhists are much more organized than Taoists. And before I discovered Taoism, I was doing studying Zen meditation. I had a wonderful teacher, but there was something about the rigidity of Japanese style Zen that I didn't feel that comfortable with. And then I was in a used bookstore one day in Portland, Oregon, and found this book by this guy, Hua Ching Ni, and read his book. And he was talking about things like being emotionally and spiritually independent. Don't rely on other people. Don't lean on other people. Do your own work. And it just, like the light bulb thing went on. And I've been studying with him for the last 35 years. And he's a really funny guy. Last time I saw him, we were taking a walk through a field and I asked him some questions about meditation. Jenny, you might relate to this. He said, too much meditation will make your teeth fall out. So I wonder what he means by that. And these kinds of Zen master, tea master, Tao masters, the more straight on question you ask, the less straight on answer you're going to get. And my understanding is probably just sitting. The energy is all up in the lower jiao and it's not coming up to where it can feed your gums and your teeth and all that. So Taoism, as we know, is about sitting still, big practice, and moving meditation. And not only that, but when you're doing Qigong or Tai Chi Chuan, we want to have this place of stillness within our movement. But also when we do stillness meditation, there's a component of movement within that, right? We're moving energy to different organs, or we're doing small heavenly orbit or something like that. So to me, it's the most balanced.
Mm.
I see a question there. What was the book I referred to? Maybe this one, Tea Mind, Tea Heart, which is stories, poems. As a matter of fact, I'm going to share a short poem right now. And this book has 50 color photos also. Some of them just in my backyard, some of them from China and Tibet, but some are just like a photo like this that I took of tea with a leaf that just fell in it.
Shenang, right? That's how it was invented, right?
Yes, those of you who study tea, you might know the two origin stories. Shen Nung, who was the mythical, legendary Chinese herbalist who tried all these different herbs and combinations and supposedly poisoned himself many times. Then he would come up with an antidote. And the other one from the Buddhist area is in China called Da Mo, came from India to China. And for various reasons, he ended up sitting in a cave, supposedly for 9 years, although that might be a sort of a numerological thing because we do a lot of things in three and nines in Qigong. Anyway, he's trying to stay awake, staring at the wall, and his eyelids keep drooping, and he gets really irritated, and he pulls off his eyelids and throws them on the ground outside the cave, and this plant grows there where his eyelids fell, and the local monks took some of the plants home and brewed it up, and he went, "Oh, this is very refreshing. We could stay up all night meditating and stuff like that." So those are the two interesting stories, the origin of tea in China, anyway. So this is a poem that says, every tea should be a time of celebration. When we drink tea, Ming, we celebrate the magical transformation of leaf and water contained in the cup or bowl from which we drink. When paired with the tea leaves that appear so dead and dry, especially those of us who drink a lot of pour, you have these cakes, hard cakes of really dried up leaves. But these tea leaves that appear so dead and dry, when paired with hot water, become transformed from dry, dead leaf to a living liqueur, connecting the drinker with the land that the tree or bush grew from, the hands that picked bud and leaves and processed them, a hard labor. The seller of the tea brings the tea to us, our own hands and mouth touching the tea, our spirits becoming calm and centered as we drink the magical brew. So it is that we celebrate this coming together of hand and heart, of land and leaf, of sunlight and moonlight and our own sweet selves. We give thanks and praises for the opportunity and blessings of sharing ourselves with the ancient magic of water, earth, and sunlight, so bright, so life-giving. We celebrate the coming together of all these things, these gifts given freely of the earth and the sky. And in this way, every tea becomes a celebration of gratitude and grace.
Beautiful.
So yes, here's something. Oh, watching it. Yes, he's still alive. He's 102 now. He's pretty much retired. I haven't seen him in years, but I saw a photo of him recently, and he was still very bright. He has a very thick accent. He actually says flied lice. Most modern Chinese don't speak that, but he's an older generation. And one time I thought it was so cute. He said, I myself are no longer Chinese. I eat too much bread. So the last time I saw him, he called me one of his generals, which I thought he meant journalist because of the magazine. But I heard later, no, it's general. But I also asked him this question, and he answered me. And then he said, you are a silly boy. I can call you that. So my Taoist name is General Silly Boy. Little tea thing we can do, a little very simple ceremony that I learned from one of my tea teachers, Wu Shen. And you know that, let's see, where do I start? Japanese Zen comes from Chinese Chan. Chinese Chan is a mixture of Taoism and Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism and Taoism. And because the cultures are very different, the Chinese are much more informal, just people, where the Japanese can be very formal, and the Japanese tea ceremony is very formal, and everything has to be done a very certain way. And there's a beauty in that. The Chinese tea ceremony is much more informal, except for this little part that we do. And those of you who know Chinese medicine or any kind of Qigong are familiar probably with the three treasures, the Sanbao, the Jing, the Qi, and the Shen. And this is a way that we can connect with all those three centers just by drinking tea. So the first thing we do, and I hope some of you, or at least are drinking tea, or I would imagine you would be, and those of you who are drinking show, pour tea, it's very dark. Doesn't matter what kind of tea you're drinking, it's all the same. It's all the same leaf originally. And the first thing we do is look at the tea, especially if you have a color in your tea. You can look at the tea, and when you're looking at the tea, your eyes are connected to your Shen. In Chinese medicine, they say sometimes the health of the Shen or the heart you can see through the eyes. So we're looking at that, and we're connecting to our heart center, our Shen. And then we smell the tea. If it's like constant comment or mint tea or a pour, it has an interesting fragrance. We smell the tea, and we know that smelling crosses the brain barrier. And when we smell the tea, we're connecting to our chi body. And then we're going to taste the tea. When we taste the tea, that connects to our Jing body. And when we taste the tea, first we taste it in 3 small sips. The first sip we taste with the front of our tongue. The second sip with the middle of our tongue, and the third sip with the back of our tongue. And sometimes you get different flavors that way too. And you imagine when you're breathing, you're swallowing, it's going all the way down to lower dantian. And I forgot one important part of before we start all that, we hold the tea in front of our heart. And this goes back to what Todd and Jenny were talking about gratitude. This is where we give thanks and praises to the earth, the leaves, the trees, the bushes. These, especially these poor trees, have roots going down hundreds of feet into the earth, bringing all those minerals and all that yin qi of the earth up into the trunk, up into the branches and the leaves and the flowers, and we get to drink it here. That grows so far away. Maybe you're drinking a tea that just comes from California, but it doesn't matter. We want to give thanks and open our heart and our being, and so that when we taste the tea, we can experience the tea tasting us. And just spend a few moments there. We drink the tea. And that's all in this book, Tea Mind, Tea Heart. That has stuff about how to prepare, how to do a tea ceremony. And I brought my group. I've been bringing people to China for many years, and we went in 2012. We went to Tibet, and I was so excited to go to Tibet. And my big goal, I told Shanti, was I want to rub shoulders with filthy nomads. And then my one thing I was nervous about was what if a monk offers me the like disgusting Tibetan tea with rancid yak butter and stuff in it. And if it's a monk offering me, I have to take it, right? I have to drink it. And so I did get to go into a temple and got pulled into this crowd of filthy nomads, and it was fabulous. And then I was in the local temple in my neighborhood. And I was sitting up in a room with three monks, and they were chanting, and we hung out together for a while. And suddenly, this guy comes in with a big thermos of the dreaded tea, and he pours this tea, and drinking it, it tastes like somebody made Constant Comment and put it on a shelf and let it get moldy. So it was like moldy tea. So I'm sitting there sipping it, and I'm going, I can do this. I can do this. And suddenly the monk next to me snatches it out of my hand and bangs it on the table. And I'm the only thing I can imagine, he was looking at this poor Westerners trying to drink this tea, and he felt pity on me or something. But it was very special to be in Tibet, really special. And I am taking a group to Taiwan in the spring, in May, and we'll be staying mostly in Taipei, the capital of Taiwan. And we'll be doing Qigong every morning in a park right across the street. We'll be doing group meditation at night, and we'll be visiting various Taoist and Buddhist temples, and we'll be visiting many magical tea houses, like one that's in the mountains outside of Taipei, that the whole floor is a pond with fish swimming around in it. And you have to walk across these stepping stones to get to your table. And another place up there is a restaurant that every meal, every dish has tea as a component in it. I'm sure someone will put something up. It's on my website. I'll be doing that in May. And would love to have any tea lovers or tea travelers or people that are interested in Buddhism and Taoism join me there. And
Wonderful.
yeah,
I didn't see that link for that, so we can get it from you. We'll put it in the Mighty Network. So I was on your website earlier, didn't see it, but we'll absolutely post it and share it in the community.
yeah, it's on page 4 of my website. No, page 3, I think, of the website.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And then I have a class starting next Wednesday, one that I'm very excited about, that I'm calling Open Heart Qigong, the opposite of open heart surgery. And it's going to be combining all the cutting edge Western ideas of the heart, like heart math solution, how to use your heart as your primary organ of perception. What the heart really does is not just a pump, it's sending electrical currents, messages to the brain, to the gut. There's a whole lot more going on than what we learned in biology class in high school. And it's also going to be Qigong and Chinese medicine for healing the heart, for strengthening our heart, our Shen. We'll be doing various invocations and mantras and practices. So that's all starting next Wednesday. Yeah, which is very exciting to me. I've been working on it for 3 months. I've been doing all the research, so I'm finally ready to get it going. And there'll probably be a link here somewhere for that too, I imagine, because, or if
Yeah.
not, I.
I'll get all the links. I found the tour. So
Oh,
I'll
great.
post that right now. Yeah, we got that for you.
Yes, if anyone has any questions about all the stuff I've been blabbing about here, feel free to ask.
If you guys have questions, feel free to raise your hands. Click the little react button. I think all of you guys know how to do it, but there we go. Oh, Steven's here. Great. Um, yeah, any questions, go ahead and raise your hand and then we'll just call on everybody. And I always have lots of questions. So if nobody else has questions, I have lots of questions.
You can provide some.
Exactly.
We just met, Todd and I, this last September in
September.
Savannah, Georgia at a Qigong conference. He was the other tea person there. We were both the tea people there.
Yeah, it was that conference that really was the spark that actually led to actually getting this thing all underway. So the week before, we didn't even have a website, and then
Goodness.
all of a sudden we had a website. So very exciting.
Came
But
home and looked up your website and was very impressed. Wow, these guys got a lot going on here. This is fantastic.
yeah, big aspirations, baby steps, but a lot of fun stuff to do. Deborah, welcome. You should be able to unmute. There you go.
Good evening.
Hello.
I have a question. It's very nice to meet you. Happy that you're here with us this evening, sir. And last night I was perusing your website and I thoroughly enjoyed a lot of your links that you had on your tour site.
Mhm.
That you were talking about the restaurant where everything had tea, and yeah, very lovely videos. But I also read one of your articles. It was a story about a man who called himself the master of simplicity,
Mhm.
and yeah, the tea that he served. And I was quite taken by your description where he said it was the marriage of heaven and earth. And
Mhm.
anyway, I wondered, was that just an article that you had in one of your journals, or is it in one of your books?
I think it's one that's in this book, actually, Tea House at the Edge of the World.
Oh,
And
okay.
a very old story about the master pouring the tea and the guy who comes to the master saying, I've done all these workshops, I've been I'm a great guru and all that. And the guy's serving him tea and it's sure spilling across the table. And so he jumps up all irate. And the tea master says, your mind is so full, there's nothing else I can offer you because there's no room. You have no room to ever learn more. And that's a sign of not a very good student or teacher, really.
Mm.
And my magazine was called The Empty Vessel because Lao Tzu called the Tao as an empty vessel. And one of the chapters, he's saying, a bowl, it's the empty space inside of the bowl that makes it useful. If it was just a lump of clay, we couldn't pour the tea into it. The more we empty ourselves, the more we can be filled.
Mm.
And it goes on forever. There's no end to it. All the teachings of all the great masters, of all the great religions and spiritual traditions, it just goes on and on. And the more we pay attention, the more we notice.
The more we know, the less that we do know, actually. We come up with more questions. Yes. But anyway, I really enjoyed that story.
Yeah, that's in Tea House at the Edge of the World.
Okay. Okay. Very nice.
A little story I want to share at the very end that's especially for Jenny. And she'll know why when I start reading it.
All right, I can't wait. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you. I enjoyed your stories.
Thanks, Deborah. Good to see you. All right. Cha.
Oh, Cha, woo, what a great name. I think you
I
can't
think
hear.
you're still muted. Here, try again.
There we go. I
There.
should know this. I zoom enough to know this. You know that. Anyway, thank you. Thank you for the stories. Thank you, Jenny and Todd, for having Solala here very special day. Then my question is when you said, it caught my attention when you said, when you did the gratitude, starting that, and then you said, your eyes connect to the chin. And when you did the eyes connect to the chin, you put your cup by your heart, right? Being very Western, like your eyes connect to your chin, I would be
It's because I left a step out. The first step is holding it by your heart.
okay.
You look at it and smell it and everything. I goofed up on that. So that's where we start.
Oh, okay.
Then you can bring it up and see it. Sometimes I use little glass. Of course, anytime you have glass, you can really see the color.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, thank you. I'm glad. Yeah, because I was like, wait, yeah. But anyway, that also the concept of the heart mind, right? That
Mm.
is so beautiful in that we think, what do we know? That our consciousness is in our brains. Maybe it's not. I think even Western medicine might be saying maybe your chin is in your gut. I don't know. I just think yeah, I'm curious to see the chin could be in the gut. I'm just gonna go with that for right now.
The Shen, we say the Shen resides in the heart, but really it resides through our whole being.
Right. Okay.
Not to say, oh, Shen in the middle, Jing down by the kidneys, and that kind of thing. But to the Chinese, our what we think of as our cognitive mind is said to reside in the heart, in the Shin. And the Japanese also have that same idea. And they have a really cute name for the heart. The spirit heart is kokoro.
Oh,
Yeah, that's what the Japanese call.
kokoro.
Yeah.
That's good. I love that. I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Sure. And it's
Thanks.
about tea, what you bring to it. Matter of fact, I had a little quote here from a friend of mine who's a tea master up in Portland, Oregon. Oh, it's just a short little. Anyway, what he's saying is how important it is when you're serving others. That's the thing. When you're serving tea, you're not coming on, I am the tea master serving the students. You're serving from your heart. And he says, I would rather drink Lipton tea out of an old tin can served by someone who is serving it with their spirit in their heart than the most expensive poor tea. And this idea of tea mind, Todd mentioned earlier, this idea of going slowly, manzo, manzo. My teacher, Hua Ching Ni, says, I can describe the ideal Taoist lifestyle in 3 words. Take it easy. And that's another translation actually for manzo. Go slowly, think slowly, eat slowly, listen slowly, move slowly. And the other thing is from the ancient teacher Zhuangzi, who's the most important of the ancient teachers after Lao Tzu. His ideal lifestyle is called Xiao which means free and easy wandering or free and easy roaming. And it doesn't mean you have to hitchhike all around the country like I did in the 60s, but it means in your mind, you're free and you're easy and you're able to roam and move through all different experiences and levels of being. Tea mind, you can drink coffee with tea mind. Doesn't mean you have to drink tea. It doesn't mean you have to drink Chinese tea or expensive poor tea. Just keep this feeling of tea mind, of being open and soft and flexible and going with the flow, the watercourse way, all those things, and live your life that way. Then you can be like these ancient masters who lived the life of free and easy wandering.
That's awesome. Hello, Sharon. So good to have you with us.
Hello, and thank you so much. You transported me back to when I was a child, and my mother used to read to me every night before bed. I am wondering, is there anywhere where you actually read the stories out loud, apart from have them
I'm
on
working
the
on
wall?
I am working on that. Yeah, I would love to do that. Yeah.
Because you bring it alive, and it just takes me
Yeah.
there. So,
It's really fun.
yeah.
And I don't know how many of you, I do work with this company called Insight Timer, which is a free,
Okay.
started in Australia, by the way. I can tell you're either from Australia or New Zealand, trying to place your accent.
I'm from New Zealand.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, I often read stories when I'm doing a class. If you become a member, it's free, and I have a bunch of courses that people can download. And then and you pay for those. And I have a free Monday night class I do every Monday. And people come from all over the world. There's often 100 people on the call from Afghanistan and Uruguay and the UK, New Zealand, Australia. And I often start the class reading a story because I love stories. We all love stories. And instead of saying, the Taoist teaching is you need to be free and you express it through a story, I think is so much more fun.
Oh, that's wonderful. What part of the world are you in?
I'm in Oregon,
In Oregon.
Eugene, Oregon. Beautiful
I'll
Eugene,
have a
Oregon.
look at the time zones.
Very different. Yeah. What time is it? Are you in New Zealand now?
I'm in
Yeah.
New Zealand on Thursday at 2:53 p.m.
Oh, okay.
And I'm actually at work, but I've snuck in to do the session.
Uh-oh, I spilled my cup too. See, I just did what I had that story not to do. Fill your cup too much.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you, Sharon. Good to see you. Jenny, a couple of announcements and a couple of things we want to cover, and then why don't we close and we'll have read his last poem in your honor. So I know there's several things we wanted to share with everybody. So a lot of things happening behind the scenes. So we actually have a YouTube channel we've gone from no subscribers to 22 subscribers, so it's skyrocketing. And then we are starting to spend a little bit more time on Instagram. We will always record all of these. So those will be posted also on the YouTube channel, as well as within the Mighty Network. And then also wanted to make sure that everybody is aware of Stephen. Stephen, are you around to maybe say a little something? Make sure that everybody gets to know Stephen may not be in a position to speak. But the other thing is every Saturday morning at 10:30 a.m. Eastern time, 4:30 a.m., I think, in New Zealand, we figured out for Sharon, who still makes it. But Stephen and I have a class we get together called Recovery, and it's really Qigong-based recovery for people that have been struggling from addiction or friends and family of those that are going through addiction or those that are recovering from just a bad day at work. So help people recover their chi. And so it's a wonderful community and we just continue to grow. So a lot of really exciting things coming up. Jenny, what did I leave out? Probably a lot.
We're all just moving and shaking, and I think we just really working hard, or not working hard, but are hardly working, but really focusing on at this time just spreading the good word and love and community to all the nooks and corners of the world. So lots of love and have some fun in the Mighty Network. And I'm working on some special things as well. So yeah, we're just rock and rolling. I'm just really happy about this event right here, right now. So
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. I think that the timing of this is great. There's parts of me that I'm very encouraged about a lot of the changes in technology and the world, but I also think that the more artificial intelligence takes over, the more important this work is, right? To go back to nature, to go back to being grounded, to be able to even just think for ourselves, right? There's so much just programming that just continues to happen. So I think that it's one of the things that I've loved about Qigong and the ability to almost have this owner's manual for how do you deal with this body thing? How do you deal with these emotions? How do you handle life? So we absolutely want to have more and more special guests. Jenny and I will continue to be here. I won't be here next week, so I'm going to Spain to go visit my son who lives in Jerez and is a flamenco guitar player, and also my partner's daughter who's going to school in Barcelona. First time over there, so excited about that. So we're hoping we can coax Stephen into doing some Qigong with us next week. He's a wonderful Qigong teacher, as you guys will come to know and love. And I think that's it, Jenny.
We have one more question.
Hmm.
Actually, Todd, Brian was having a hard time raising his hand and he would love to address a question.
Absolutely.
So I will help him. Brian, I'll have you unmute. So you can go ahead and mute and then I'll spotlight you.
Thank you for all the things that you shared tonight, and it was great to see you again. I actually was at the conference in Savannah as well. That's where I got connected with Todd and with you as well. But I was just curious if you had like your favorite book about tea that's like maybe a little more historical. I read Liquid Jade, and I also have one that I just got called The Chinese Art of Tea. But I'm curious if you have one that you really recommend for people.
Is The Chinese Art of Tea by John Blofeld?
It's close. Hold on.
If so, it's a great book.
Yes.
Yeah, great book.
That one I haven't started yet, but if there are any others, I'm trying to make a little list of kind of history research.
There's a group of people that I'm connected with in Taiwan who will be visiting when we go to Taiwan called Global Tea Hut.
Okay.
They publish a magazine and they have a big center there, and they teach tea as a spiritual practice, which a lot of us are doing. And he has a book called The Way of Tea, I think it's called. It's really good. And if you go to their website, globalteahut.org, you'll see they sell a lot of teas and stuff, but their books are really great. And they've been publishing a magazine for years. It used to come out every month with gorgeous photos and stuff. And now they're doing a quarterly book to come out every quarter with articles about the cultural and spiritual aspects of tea. A lot of stuff written by Chinese authors and the history of tea and incense that we use and different things like that. That's really good people to learn from.
That's awesome. I will definitely check that out. And then a quick follow-up, where do you order your tea online from? What's your website you go to?
Todd here has a website, tea, I believe.
Yeah, we don't really have, I appreciate you thinking of us. We don't really have any tea. Brian, you got some of the puree we had when we were in Savannah, but we are more importantly now just working on building community. We'll start though posting those. I think there's a lot of good ones. Verdant tea is a really good one. Rishi tea is a very good one. So we'll put some posts and some links. And if I actually look back at some of the other Wild Tea Party recordings, we've got just several others that are in there. The Art of Tea is another great one as well. So a lot of great options. And also, Trident. But Jenny, whom I forget, what's Peter's place? Trident.
Trident in Boulder, Colorado. Yeah.
Oh,
things going through my
Can you
head.
say that again? Sorry, I didn't.
Trident.
Trident.
Like a little
like a
Poseidon fork or whatever. Yeah.
I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah, you want to get tea if you really want to be on the tea train from either people or people you can trust, because not all tea in China, many kinds of tea are heavily sprayed. So you want to make sure you're getting organic tea, you're getting high quality tea. I tell people it's like buying a cheap bottle of wine. It's not the experience of having a really expensive, really beautiful bottle of wine. It's going to work in your body and interact with your tea in a different way, right?
Yeah.
Hey, Dan?
That was just going to remind me of my favorite book, ironically. It's called The Art and Alchemy of Chinese Tea, which is very.
Do you have it there?
I don't. I would have to go downstairs to get it, but I'll put the link in. But fantastic book, and just a lot of great storytelling and really good insights, especially into my favorite tea, which is High Mountain Oolong tea. With that being said, welcome.
I just go ahead, Dan. We had one more question, Todd.
Yeah, okay. Hi, Solala. Good to see you face to face.
Yeah, for the first time.
Yeah, many years of Facebook, and I've been in the empty vessel a few times too. So I was wondering, because I know you were a hippie back from like 60s in Berkeley and all that sort of thing. So when did you get into Gong Fu Cha style brewing?
Oh, yeah, more like 20 years ago.
Sorry, how many is it?
More like 20 years ago.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, back then I wasn't drinking tea. I did drink coffee for a long time and then had to get off the coffee and go to black tea, and then I went to green tea, and
Yeah, because it seems more like a sort of recent phenomenon that Gong Fu Cha is big in the
Oh,
West. So I was wondering how
yeah.
that came about for you.
Where I live in the West Coast, we go to music festivals, and the young people, it's really cool and hip to have Kung Fu tea. And the beloved festival I used to go to, and they would just sit, it's an outdoor festival. They're just sitting on the ground with a little table, pouring Kung Fu cha, giving it to everybody for free. And it's part of the culture that's happening. Not so much in Eugene, but in Portland, there's a couple of different really great tea houses that you can go to also that are really fun. So it's becoming a culture, especially with young people. So it's such a healthy thing to get into as a things people could be doing.
Cool.
Yeah.
Dan, good to see you. It's just super ironic that I just shared about that book, The Art and Alchemy of Chinese Tea, and the author is Daniel Reed.
Oh, Daniel Reed, yes, I have that.
Yeah,
High
rest.
Mountain Oolong tea. That's his
Yeah,
go-to tea. Yeah.
yeah, me too. Jenny, what happened? What did I do wrong? Help me.
Nothing.
You said there was another question?
No, that was
Oh,
Brian.
it was Dan.
Oh,
It was
okay.
Dan.
Oh, Dan, Brian, then Dan.
Yeah.
All right, why don't
Okay.
you send us
Okay.
out with
All right.
your words?
And this one is called The Tea House at the Edge of the World Sutra. And this is why I know Jenny has some background in Tibetan. And this one takes, some of these stories take place in ancient China, some of them in Tibet, all around different areas. But this is another one that takes place in the US. Sophie had been a serious meditator for many years. By serious, I mean she took it very seriously and kept up a very regular meditation schedule. Once in the morning, once again in the evening, at least 30 to 60 minutes each time, had been doing it for years. But she was beginning to get a little frustrated as her meditation practice was not yielding much compared to what she was putting into it. It was like depositing money over and over again into an account, but never seeing any return on it. Of course, it was not like she was expecting enlightenment or anything like that. Maybe a little Satori now and then would be nice, though. A little glimpse, glimpse into the vast depths of Tao. Excuse me. I am going to record this book in audiobook. I'll let you guys know. Sophie's practice was a blend of Taoism and Zen, which is itself a nice blend of Buddhist and Taoism and Tibetan Buddhism. She was also a serious student of various sutras. She had studied many sutras, from the diamond to the heart, and felt that she had a good grasp of their meaning and their meaning for her own life, but she still felt unfulfilled. Instead of being filled with wisdom and insight, she felt slightly adrift, bobbing slowly around in a sea of samsara. Then, one slow moving, humdrum day, she found a brief allusion on one of the many Buddhist websites she frequented to a very rare sutra called the Tea House at the Edge of the World Sutra. She liked the sound of that. She was a big tea drinker and loved all kinds of tea, especially the deeply moving purs. She loved reading about tea while drinking tea and reading books about Cha Dao, the way of tea, but a tea sutra, now that was interesting. She spent some time digging around on the net, which she referred to as CyberDAO, but could not find anything else about it. But instead of becoming discouraged, she felt even more determined to find out more about this strange sounding sutra. She asked all her Buddhistically minded friends about it, but no one had ever heard of such a thing. Maybe it doesn't really exist, said one of them. Do you believe everything on the internet? But Sophie had a feeling, an inkling, an urge to find out more about this mysterious sutra, which she was sure did exist and also would hopefully be a doorway for her to enter a deeper level of practice, both in tea and meditation, and perhaps even in life itself. Unfortunately, Sophie did not read Sanskrit or Tibetan, and so had to rely upon English translations of various sacred writings, which was not ideal since many Western scholars knew little about the actual practices of things like meditation and Qigong, and so their translations were often faulty. Let's see, I'm going to skip over a little bit so I don't take too much more of your time. Her search went on, let's see, or she's thinking maybe it's a terma, one of those hidden sutras that Padmasambhava, the famous Buddhist hero, hid all over Tibet, so that many years later, certain highly evolved aspirants would discover them. Sophie did not consider herself highly evolved, and so perhaps she would never really find this mysterious sutra. But it had gotten a hold on her, and it was increasingly difficult to let go. One day, after a long afternoon of madly scanning books and websites for new information about the elusive sutra, she found her head falling, slowly but surely, onto her desk in front of her computer. She was out for a few moments, but when she came to, she felt a little woozy. Okay, she thought to herself, that's it for today. If not for tomorrow or the day after that, I give up this ridiculous quest for a ridiculous sutra. She felt she needed some air and perhaps some tea as well. She went to her tea cupboard, only to find the cupboard bare, and so grabbing her coat, hat, and scarf, made her way down the hill to a cozy tea house she had occasionally visited. Every other time she'd been there, the place had been packed with all kinds of tea-loving folks, but today it was totally empty, deserted even. Not only was she the only one there, but there didn't seem to be anyone behind the counter either. She was not sure if she should stay, but decided to sit at her favorite table and see what happened. She liked this particular table because it was so old and even cracked. Obviously, it had been in use for many years, in the tea house or perhaps even in someone's home. It reminded her of the great Japanese aesthetic called wabi-sabi, the appreciation for the old and worn and imperfect. Indeed, she was feeling a bit old and worn and most definitely imperfect these days. Her eyes were tired from poring over many books and websites. Her neck hurt from gazing for hours into the computer. Her back was sore from lugging around piles of books from the library to her home. Her heart felt heavy as she realized she should probably just give up her dream of finding the sutra and remain unfulfilled spiritually and emotionally. Very sad. Two people came in the door and sat down at her table, right across from her. They did not look familiar, and Sophie wondered why they were sitting at her very table instead of one of the other empty ones. The two were an old man, an old woman, and a young man. Though if she blinked, as she tended to do when her eyes were tired, they looked like a young woman and an old man. Blink again, and it was an old woman and a young man, sitting there across from her, smiling warmly at her. So warmly she felt a little embarrassed, as if she were meant to recognize them as important people in her life, which she didn't, or at least thought she didn't, though she could not be sure. Okay, Monzo, turn the pages slowly. Suddenly, the proprietor of the tea house appeared at her table. He looked at her only. It was almost as if he did not actually see the other two people at the table, or at least chose not to recognize them as such. Ni hao, he said, "你要不要喝普洱茶?" She knew he was speaking Mandarin, of which she understood only a little. She thought it might be asking her if she wanted some tea, so she just nodded yes and said, "How?" which she thought might mean yes or good or something like that. He nodded at her, and still ignoring the two others at the table, went away to brew her tea. The two people did not speak to her at first, just smiled their warm smiles like two cups of warm and lovely tea. She was a little confused and even a bit frightened at first, but then she felt herself begin to melt a bit, and before long she was smiling back at them. Said the young man, "The sutra you seek is not to be found in books or websites." He looked at the old woman as if to receive permission to continue. She nodded her head and he went on. "This sutra, the tea house at the edge of the world sutra, is what we call a secret or hidden sutra, much like the ones Padmasambhava hid in caves high in the mountains of Tibet. Yes, sometimes they were actually books or texts, but other times they were more like visions. That is what the tea house at the edge of the world sutra is, a vision, not a book of any kind, certainly not a website." And he laughed, and Sophie found herself laughing right along with him. Of course, she thought, I should have known. Then the old woman spoke. She leaned in toward Sophie and put a palm on the middle of Sophie's chest, her heart center. The hand felt light as a feather, but Sophie found herself gasping for a moment as if there were a great weight on her chest. Then, all of a sudden, the weight was lifted and she felt as light as a feather herself. The sutra you seek, said the old woman, is right here. It has always been here. You have felt it many times when you meditated, when you drank good tea, when you laughed with your friends, when you played with your sister, when you danced in the dark, when you reached out for love, for knowledge, for experience, for healing. It will always be here. This kind of sutra, she went on, is not one that can be written down or imprisoned on a page. It cannot be carried around like furniture. It can only exist in the living heart of the seeker. It can be shared, but only to one who has also realized him or herself as a living embodiment of wisdom, or as healers in a world that is filled with sickness and ignorance. Indeed, it must be shared. If not, it will begin to grow weaker and weaker like a candle just before the flame goes out. Only by sharing this sutra, this vision, will you be able to keep it alive in your heart. Only by sharing what you have learned in your travels, both inner and outer, with others, will the flame of this sutra go stronger and never go out. Please remember this. She lifted her palm then, and Sophie felt a great gushing of chi, of love, and even a small part of wisdom flooding her being. Ah, she thought, ah. The proprietor of the tea house appeared at the table once again, carrying a small teapot and one cup, again only looking at her as if the other two were not there. And it appeared that her new friends were indeed gone on beyond. 这个很好茶, he said, smiling at her. Again, she did not know what he was saying, but she understood all the same. How, she said, 很好, and smiling began drinking her tea. The end.
So wonderful. Just so good. It reminds me of, and then we'll close, but Brian, you're asking about good books. One of my very favorite books is called The Last Chinese Chef.
Oh,
Very good book. A lot about Chinese food and culture, and it's got a lot of good storytelling to it as well. But it's one that I've given away. Jenny, remember Jenny, the other Jenny Chu from
Oh
the
yeah, yeah,
I gave it to
yeah.
her and then she gave it to somebody else, so it's making its way around the world. Another good one. But
how we share the sutra of the heart of the tea house, right?
Beautiful.
That's the gift song.
Solala, thank you so much. You did
Mm.
so wonderful. I think you touched a lot of people and just appreciate you and taking the time to be with us. And
Hey,
we'll continue to promote your stuff and feel free to promote all your stuff within the community as well. That's why we're here to shine the light on other people. So we really appreciate you being here with us. Jenny, any final
much.
words?
Oh, I'm just in gratitude. Thank you. Yeah, no, the sutra is alive and well in my heart right now. So I feel blessed. So thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah, you're so welcome. I'm so
Yeah.
glad I got to do this. Thank you for letting me do this and coming into your lives. And thank you for being
Mm.
here, all of you.
Absolutely. We'll do it again. And like we said, it was good timing, right? You're in between Wednesday sessions. So we caught you right in the middle.
Yeah.
It worked out wonderful for everybody. We will, of course, welcome you back anytime. So thank you,
Mhm.
everybody. Appreciate you guys partying with us tonight and look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Much love. Blessings. Mm.